In this video, I'm going to explain the game of Stag Hunt. So, the story here, it's stylization. We have two hunters. Players 1 and 2 are hunters, and they're out hunting stag. No surprise there. And the idea here is that to hunt a stag, they need to work together. And player 1 is going to sit in a blind with a gun, while player 2 beats the bushes, drives the stag towards player 1. And that's how you hunt a stag, supposedly. But let's go with it. The thing is that while they're out in the woods, they are going to have the opportunity to chase rabbits, right? They can always drop what they're doing, go after a rabbit, and the assumption is they can get the rabbit on their own, right? So they need to work together to get the stag. They can get a rabbit on their own. So this leads to the following outcomes, right? So we're going to use stag as sticking to the plan. You could use cooperate. And we're going to use rabbit for chasing a rabbit. That could be defect. Depends on each other's. I'm going stag and rabbit here. So if player 1 sticks to the plan, hunts stag, and player 2 hunts stag, they both get a stag and they share it. And a lot of meat in a stag. There's a lot more. Half a stag is a lot more than a rabbit, right? That's important later. If, on the other hand, player 1 sticks to the plan, hunts stag, but player 2 goes after a rabbit, then player 2 gets a rabbit, player 1 gets nothing. If player 1, on the other hand, the bottom row, if player 1 decides to hunt rabbit, then player 2, if player 2 sticks to the plan and is out beating the bushes while player 1 is chasing the rabbit, player 1 gets a rabbit, player 2 gets nothing. And finally, if they both just completely blow off the plan, each goes after a rabbit, we assume each gets a rabbit. Okay, so what are the preferences over this? And a lot of it comes down to, hey, what they care about is getting more meat, right? So the best outcome for player 1, right, the meat maximization outcome is stag-stag. If they both stick to the plan, half a stag is a lot of meat. The second best outcome, if I can't get the stag, it's better to get a rabbit. Now, we do have this question, right? In rabbit outcome, they both get rabbits. In the rabbit stag outcome, where player 1 goes for the rabbit and player 2 goes for the stag, well, player 1 still gets a rabbit. And so I've chosen in this instance to make player 1 indifferent, right? If player 1 gets a rabbit, player 1 is indifferent about whether player 2 actually got it, right? So I'm making player 1 self-interested. Now, you could say that, yeah, maybe player 1 would prefer the rabbit outcome where, he can enjoy his rabbit knowing the other guy's, he didn't screw the other guy over. We could put that preference order in there. It's not necessary. It won't make any difference. And I like people can be indifferent, and I like to have a little indifference in here. So here we have a case where there's indifference over outcomes. And then finally, stag rabbit, right? If the worst case scenario for player 1 is player 1 hunts the stag, player 2 goes after the rabbit, and player 1 ends up with nothing, while player 2 at least has a rabbit, right? And so player 1's totally screwed in that case, right? 0 meat. So that's the player 1's preferences. Those are the payoffs here. Doing the same thing with player 2, and I won't go through it. It should be obvious, though, that we have the same thing and we have the same indifference. Player 2 is indifferent to the outcomes in which player 2 has a rabbit and player 1 also does. Whether or not player 1 has a rabbit doesn't matter to player 2. I'm doing this one totally self-interested. They're totally about how much meat they individually have. Solving for the Nash Equilibria here. All right, iteration. We start randomly, and I never start randomly. I always start the same place. Stag, player 1 picking the first row. What's the best response, right? If player 1 decides to hunt the stag, what's player 2's best response? Well, player 2 now has a choice between a 4 and a 3, looking at the second numbers, or as we in the language of the game, it's either I stick, I know he's back there. So I'm better off getting a stag, right? So player 2 is going to pick stag. If player 2 picks stag, what's player 1's best response? Well, looking at that first column, first number, stag is 4, rabbit is 3. This the choice that player 1 has essentially, because now player 2 has picked that column. And so player 1, yeah, stag is the best response. So bam, Nash equilibrium. But we're not done. Through iteration, we pick, we go to the other to pick another starting point. Same thing. What's the best response of player 2? If player 1 picks rabbit, player 2's best response is to go for rabbit. And yes, if player 2 goes for rabbit, player 1's choice of going for, yes, that rabbit is a mutually, their best responses. Neither one regrets, right? Because that's the other thing. If one player goes for a rabbit and then he gets done and looks and says the other player, you went for a rabbit too. Well, I'm glad I went for the rabbit. There's no regrets, right? They might wish they'd gotten the stag, but given what the other player did, there's no regrets here. That's another concept of Nash equilibrium. Okay, so what do we got? We got multiple Nash equilibria, and there's a lot of that going around with these other games. The stag Nash equilibria is Pareto superior to the rabbit. That's the key thing in this game. They will really want to really do better when they work together. And so when it comes to looking at this, like with a prisoner's dilemma, where you have an outcome, a Nash equilibrium outcome that has a Pareto superior outcome, but that is right in the prisoner's dilemma, the cooperate outcome is Pareto superior, but it's not a one-shot Nash equilibrium. Well, in this game, where they screw up and go get rabbits, that one has there is a mutually preferred outcome where they both stick to the plan and get stag. But it's also, in this case, not only is it Pareto superior, but it is also itself a one-shot Nash equilibrium. So that makes this a coordination problem. And like I say, this is a coordination problem that should be easy to solve, right? Both sticking to the plan is a one-shot Nash equilibrium, right? And so any kind of reputation, right? This, to my mind, this is pushing on an open door, right? If it's an equilibrium, if I hunt stag, your best response is to hunt stag. So, for any minimal belief that the other is going to do it, or any kind of reputational repeated play, I mean, just practically anything should get to this point. It should be easy, right? So this is a coordination problem. We do have multiple equilibria, so they could hunt rabbit, right? And if either player had any inkling that the other one was doing it, that would be that player's best response. So rabbit is a Nash equilibrium, but they both prefer the other Nash equilibrium. And so this makes it a coordination problem. They just have to try to land on the better Nash equilibrium. That makes this a pure coordination problem. And the kind of thing that, is here we have a community of interest. And like I say, it should be easy to solve. But that's Stag Hunt for you.